My name is Sophia Whitmore. I'm 32 years old, and the day my mother smiled while watching me clear a $540,000 mortgage was the same day I learned that love, real love, can be conditional, strategic, and cruel. The smile came first, warm, proud, almost maternal. Then she dropped the bomb. But before I tell you what she said, before I tell you how my entire sense of family collapsed in one quiet sentence, I need you to understand who I was to her long before that moment. Because this didn't begin at the bank. It didn't begin with money. It began when I was a child who learned very early that being useful earned affection, and being inconvenient earned silence. The day everything shattered started in a glass-walled bank office in downtown Hartford, the kind of modern city space that smells like polished wood and quiet authority. My hands were shaking as I signed the final document. I remember gripping the pen too tightly, my fingers aching, my chest tight with a strange mix of pride and exhaustion. Years of overtime, years of skipped vacations, years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to my family. When the bank officer slid the stamped papers across the table and said, "Congratulations, the mortgage is officially cleared," something inside me broke open. I exhaled, I laughed, I cried, just a little, and then I looked at my mother. Margaret Whitmore sat beside me, perfectly composed. Her hair was styled the way it always was, soft waves, carefully sprayed. She wore a pearl necklace she saved for important moments. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, and then she smiled at me. That smile made me feel 10 years old again, like I'd finally done something right. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," she said softly. My chest swelled. All those years of trying finally validated. Then she leaned closer, lowered her voice, and said something so unexpected, so calculated, that the room seemed to tilt. "Well," she said, still smiling, "now that the house is fully mine again, it's time we talk about you moving out." The words didn't land all at once. They arrived slowly, like ice water dripping down my spine. "Moving out?" I repeated, stupidly. She nodded, as if this was obvious, as if we'd discussed it already. "You've done what you promised, and I think it's best we both move on." Move on? From what? From me? If this story already has you asking, how could a mother do that? Stay with me, because what I uncovered next made that moment feel merciful by comparison. But before we go any further, if you've ever sacrificed for family only to feel used, misunderstood, or discarded, please like this video, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and sometimes telling it out loud is how the healing begins. Now let me take you back to the beginning, back to the version of me who thought love was something you earned. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with trimmed hedges and neighbors who waved but never asked questions. From the outside, the Whitmore family looked stable, respectable. My father, James Whitmore, worked in insurance. My mother stayed home when I was young, then later managed a local nonprofit. We had dinner at the table. We went to church on Sundays. No one ever raised their voice in public. But inside our house, affection moved like currency. My younger brother, Evan, was the golden child. He was charming, athletic, and effortlessly liked. Teachers adored him. Coaches praised him. My mother laughed more easily around him, touched his arm when she spoke, and defended him even when he was wrong. I was the responsible one, the helper, the fixer. When Evan forgot his homework, I stayed up helping him redo it. When my parents argued, I learned to disappear. When something broke, I found a way to fix it. Praise for me came in the form of relief. At least Sophia can handle it. At least Sophia understands. At least Sophia doesn't make things harder. Love, I learned, came with conditions. By the time I was 16, my father's health began to fail, quietly at first, then all at once. Medical bills piled up. Insurance didn't cover everything. The house, our house, became a weight none of us talked about but all of us felt. After my father passed when I was 22, something in my mother hardened. Grief didn't soften her, it sharpened her. She became anxious about money, obsessed with stability. The house was her anchor, her proof that she hadn't lost everything. She clung to it with a desperation that felt personal, almost territorial. That's when she started saying things like, "This house is all I have left. If we lose this place, I don't know what I'll do. You're the only one I can count on." Evan, meanwhile, moved through life untouched by responsibility. He dropped out of college twice, changed jobs constantly, borrowed money that never came back. My mother made excuses for him every time. "He's still finding himself," she'd say. I stopped correcting her. When the mortgage payments began falling behind, my mother came to me, not with a request, but with an assumption. "You're good with money," she said one evening, setting a stack of overdue notices on the table between us, "and you're living here anyway." The implication hung heavy. I was 26. I had a solid job in project management. I paid rent. I contributed to groceries. I told myself it was temporary, that families help each other. "I can help for a while," I said carefully. Her relief was immediate, almost hungry. That while turned into years. I worked longer hours, took freelance contracts on weekends, postponed moving out, postponed relationships. Every time I thought about starting my own life, my mother's voice echoed in my head. "Just until we're stable again. Just until things improve. I need you." The total amount didn't hit me until the bank appointment. $540,000. When the officer said it out loud, I almost laughed. It didn't feel real. It felt like someone else's burden, someone else's life. But I paid it, every last dollar, because somewhere along the way, I confused sacrifice with love. After the meeting, we walked out of the bank together. The autumn air was crisp, leaves scattered across the sidewalk. My mother looped her arm through mine, a gesture she hadn't done in years. "We should celebrate," she said brightly. "Dinner, maybe." I nodded, still numb. At dinner, she talked about renovations, about repainting the guest room, about fresh starts. Not once did she say thank you again. Not once did she acknowledge what this had cost me. I tried to tell myself that didn't matter. Until the next morning. I came home from work early that day, exhausted. The house was quiet. Too quiet. When I stepped into the living room, I noticed something strange. A folder on the coffee table. Manila, neatly labeled, property documents. My stomach tightened. I flipped it open. Inside were updated deeds, legal forms, my mother's name, only her name, printed clearly where mine had once been penciled in as future consideration. There was also a typed letter from a lawyer. I didn't understand all the language, but one sentence burned into my brain. Ownership remains solely with Margaret Whitmore. I stood there, heart pounding, when my mother walked in. "Oh," she said lightly, "you found that." Found that. "You told me that, once the mortgage was cleared, we'd talk about adding my name." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "Sophia, you misunderstood." Misunderstood. I never promised that, and honestly, it wouldn't make sense. This is my home. I raised my family here. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "So what was I to you? A tenant? An investor?" She frowned. "Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. "I sacrificed everything," I said, my voice shaking. "I stayed when I could have left. I paid for a house I don't own." She crossed her arms. "And you lived here rent-free for years." That lie hit me like a slap. "I paid rent," I said, "every month." She waved her hand dismissively. "Not market value." I realized then that we were having two very different conversations. To her, this was business. To me, this was betrayal. "I need you to start looking for your own place," she said calmly. "Evan might need to move back in for a while." Evan. Of course. I stared at her, my vision blurring. So that's it? I'm done being useful? Her silence answered for her. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment, every promise, every time she'd leaned on me emotionally while quietly protecting herself legally. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I made a decision. I would find out exactly what else she'd been hiding, because people who manipulate this carefully rarely stop at one lie, and I was about to discover just how deep this went. I didn't confront my mother that night. I didn't slam doors or pack bags or scream into pillows like people do in movies. I did something far more dangerous. I stayed quiet. Because silence, when you're finally awake, becomes a weapon. The next morning, I moved through the house like a guest. I washed my mug and dried it immediately instead of leaving it on the rack. I made my bed perfectly, hospital corners tight. I even thanked my mother when she reminded me to lock the back door before leaving for work. She smiled at me again, that same smile. And that's when I knew. I wasn't imagining things. She wasn't uncomfortable. She wasn't guilty. She was relieved. Relieved that the house was paid off. Relieved that her security was restored. Relieved that she no longer needed me. For years, I thought I was the strong one, the dependable one, the adult in the room. But now I understood the truth. I was only valued as long as I was useful. That realization didn't come with tears. It came with clarity. At work, I couldn't focus. Numbers blurred on my screen, emails stacked up unanswered. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, expecting another small favor from my mother, another reminder that Evan needed help, another subtle, guilt-laced request. Instead, the message came from Aunt Claire, my mother's older sister. "Hey, Soph, your mom said you might be moving out soon. Wanted to check in." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "She said that?" I typed back. There was a pause. Then, yes, she sounded excited. Excited? Something inside me hardened. That evening, instead of going straight home, I stopped at the county records office. I told myself I was just confirming details, that I wanted peace of mind, that I wasn't looking for anything else. But deep down, I knew. The clerk was polite, efficient. She pulled up the property file with a few clicks. The screen glowed between us, indifferent to the way my heart began pounding. And there it was, not just the updated deed, a refinancing attempt from 3 years earlier. My name wasn't just missing, it had been deliberately excluded. "What's this?" I asked, pointing. The clerk glanced at the screen. "Looks like a restructuring request. It was denied at the time." "Why?" She frowned slightly. "Because the applicant didn't have sufficient income on her own." My mother. 3 years ago, when I was already paying the bulk of the mortgage, she tried to refinance about me, without even telling me. The only reason it hadn't gone through was because she couldn't qualify a loan, which meant something worse. She'd planned this long before the mortgage was cleared. I thanked the clerk and walked out into the cold air, my breath coming fast. My hands were shaking, not from sadness now, but from fury. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't grief. This was strategy. That night, I finally allowed myself to cry, but not loudly. Quiet tears soaked into my pillow as I stared at the ceiling, replaying memories with new eyes. Every time she'd discouraged me from buying my own place, every time she'd said, "Why waste money when you have a home here?" Every time she'd framed my sacrifice as family loyalty. It wasn't loyalty she wanted, it was control. The next few days were tense, but polite. My mother avoided deep conversation. She talked about weather, groceries, Evan's job prospects. I noticed how often she mentioned Evan lately, planting seeds. "He's had such a rough time," she'd say casually. "He really needs stability." Translation: "You've outlived your usefulness." Then came the text. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a meeting. "Mom said you're kicking me out too. What did I do to you?" "Evan." My stomach dropped. I excused myself and called him immediately. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He sounded genuinely confused. "She said you're angry and trying to push me away, that you want the house to yourself now that you've paid it off." I laughed once, sharp, bitter. "I don't own the house," I said. "She does, completely." There was a pause. "That's not what she told me." Of course it wasn't. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. My mother wasn't just discarding me, she was rewriting the story, turning me into the villain, protecting her image while isolating me from the only other person who might question her version of events. That was when I decided I wouldn't leave quietly, not to punish her, but to protect myself. I started documenting everything: old bank transfers, emails, text messages where she thanked me for saving the house, messages where she'd promised, "This will always be your home too." I also reached out to a therapist, something I'd avoided for years because I didn't think my pain qualified, because others had it worse. But sitting in that office, explaining how I'd paid for a house I was being asked to leave, the therapist said something that shifted everything. "Financial abuse doesn't always look like stealing," she said gently. "Sometimes it looks like obligation disguised as love." That sentence stayed with me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. One Sunday afternoon, my mother asked me to sit with her at the kitchen table, the same table where overdue notices had been laid out like quiet threats. "I've been thinking," she said, folding her hands. "It might be best if we set a timeline for your move." I met her gaze, calm, prepared. "Before we do that," I said, "I have a few questions." She stiffened slightly. "Why did you try to refinance the house 3 years ago without me?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "That's none of your business." "It became my business when I paid the mortgage," I replied. She leaned back, defensive now. "I did what I had to do to protect myself." "And what about protecting me?" I asked. She sighed. "Sophia, you're an adult. You chose to help." That word again, chose. I chose to help my family, not to be erased. Silence stretched between us. Then she said it, the sentence that finally severed something inside me. "I never asked you to expect anything in return." There it was. No apology, no acknowledgement, just justification. "I see," I said quietly. She looked relieved, as if she thought the conversation was over, but it wasn't. "I'll move out, but not before we're honest, with Evan, with the family, with ourselves." Her face tightened. "There's no need to involve anyone else." That told me everything. Within a week, I packed my things. I found a small apartment across town, nothing fancy, but mine. On move-out day, Evan showed up unexpectedly. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, eyes darting between us. I handed him copies of the documents, the transfers, the texts. He read silently, then he looked at our mother. She didn't deny it. "I did what I thought was best," she said, stiffly. "For who?" Evan asked. She had no answer. I left that house with my head high, but my heart heavy. Not because I missed the place, but because I was grieving a version of my mother that never really existed. As I closed the door behind me, I realized something profound. Paying off that mortgage didn't buy me security, but it bought me truth. I thought leaving the house would be the end of it. That once I had my own keys, my own space, my own silence, the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The first night in my new apartment felt unreal. The rooms were smaller than I was used to, the walls bare, the air smelling faintly of fresh paint and cardboard. My mattress was on the floor. My clothes still lived in half-open boxes. But for the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No reminders, no guilt, no quiet expectations. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, eating takeout from the container, and waited for the grief to hit. It didn't. What I felt instead was exhaustion, the kind that sinks into your bones after years of holding yourself together for everyone else. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, there were 6 missed calls, all from my mother. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. A part of me, the old part, wanted to call her back immediately, to smooth things over, to reassure her that I wasn't angry, that I wasn't abandoning her, that I was still the same dependable Sophia. But that part of me was tired, so I didn't answer. The messages came next. We need to talk. You left without resolving anything. You're hurting this family. That last one made me laugh, a short, humorless sound. Hurting this family, as if the family hadn't been quietly hurting me for years. At work, I threw myself into projects. It was easier to manage deadlines than emotions. My colleagues noticed the change, how I stayed later, spoke less, moved with a sharp efficiency that left no room for small talk. "You okay?" my manager asked one afternoon. I nodded automatically. Just a lot going on. He hesitated. "You know you don't have to carry everything alone." I almost told him, almost laughed at how absurd the whole thing sounded out loud. Instead, I thanked him and went back to my desk. It was Evan who finally broke the silence between us. He showed up at my apartment unannounced that weekend, standing awkwardly in the doorway with a grocery bag in his hands. "I brought food. I figured you probably haven't unpacked your kitchen yet." That was Evan. Always late, always clumsy, but trying in his own way. We sat on the floor, eating pasta out of plastic containers. The room echoed with emptiness, every sound amplified. "I didn't know," he said finally, "about the refinance, about any of it." "I know," I replied. He rubbed his face, guilt etched into every line. "She's not doing well," he added. "She keeps saying you abandoned her." The word stung more than I expected. "I didn't abandon her," I said quietly. "I protected myself." He didn't argue. That alone felt like progress. Before he left, Evan hesitated at the door. "She's planning something," he said. "What do you mean?" "She's been making calls, talking about setting things right. I don't know what that means, but just be careful." That night, I barely slept. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a formal envelope, thick and official with a law firm's return address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a notice of intent. My mother was selling the house. Not downsizing, not transferring ownership, selling. The house I paid for. The house she'd sworn was her only security. The house she used to justify years of sacrifice. The letter explained that she was required to notify me because of documented financial involvement, but made it clear I had no legal claim. I sat there, staring at the words until they blurred. She was cashing out, and she hadn't told me. I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, skipping preliminaries. There was a pause. Then, "I didn't think it concerned you anymore." Concerned me. "You're selling a house I paid for," I said, my voice trembling now. "And you don't think that concerns me?" "You chose to help," she replied coolly, "and now I'm choosing what's best for my future." Her future. "What about mine?" I asked. "You're young," she said dismissively. "You'll recover." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that, like a thread finally breaking after being stretched too thin. "I hope it's worth it," I said, and hung up. The sale moved quickly, too quickly, which told me something else was going on. I did some digging. The buyer wasn't a stranger. It was Evan's girlfriend's parents. A private sale, below market value, no realtor. My mother wasn't just selling, she was orchestrating. When Evan found out, the fallout was immediate. She told them it was urgent, he said over the phone, his voice tight, that she needed liquidity, that it was family. Family. The irony burned. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about rewriting history one last time, securing her narrative, ensuring that when the dust settled, she would be the victim who lost everything, not the woman who had taken advantage of her daughter's loyalty. I met with a lawyer the next day. He was kind but direct. "You have a moral case," he said, "a strong one, but legally, it's complicated." Complicated, that word again. He explained my options: limited, risky, emotionally draining. As I left his office, I felt the weight of the truth settle in. Justice doesn't always look like courtrooms and verdicts. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your integrity intact. But my mother wasn't done. Not yet. Because a few days later, she made a public move, one that humiliated me in a way I never saw coming. I found out about the post the same way everyone else did. Not from my mother, not from Evan, not from a phone call or a warning. I found out because my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. At first, I ignored it. I was in the shower, letting the hot water run longer than necessary, trying to rinse off the heaviness that had settled into my chest since the lawyer's meeting. But when I stepped out and saw the screen lighting up again and again, something in my gut twisted. Messages, missed calls, tags. I dried my hands quickly and opened the first notification. It was from Aunt Claire. "Sophia, I just saw your mom's post. Are you okay?" Post? I opened Facebook, and there it was. A long, carefully written message from my mother, accompanied by a smiling photo of her standing in front of the house I had paid for, the house she was now selling. The caption began with, "After years of struggle, sacrifice, and doing everything alone." Alone. My throat tightened as I kept reading. She wrote about being a widow, about carrying the burden of a home by herself, about ungrateful children who mistook help for entitlement, about how hard it is when those you give everything to walk away the moment things improve. The comments poured in beneath it. "So proud of you, Margaret. You're so strong. Some children don't understand sacrifice. You deserve peace now." Peace. My name wasn't mentioned, not directly, but every sentence pointed to me, every word carefully crafted to paint a picture where she was the martyr and I was the selfish daughter who abandoned her once the hard work was done. I felt sick. Then my phone rang. It was my cousin Rachel. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice tense. "People are talking. They think you just used your mom and left." I laughed, again, that sharp, broken sound. "Used her?" I repeated. "I paid off her mortgage." There was silence on the other end. "You what?" That was when I realized how powerful lies become when they're told first. By the time I hung up, I had received messages from family friends, church members, even an old teacher, some concerned, some judgmental, all based on a story that erased me completely. I wanted to scream, to comment publicly, to post screenshots, to defend myself point by point. But my therapist's voice echoed in my head. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. So instead of responding online, I did something else. I showed up. The following Sunday, my mother hosted a farewell gathering at the house, a quiet goodbye before the sale finalized. She didn't invite me, but Evan did. When I walked into that living room, conversations stalled. Eyes flicked towards me, then away. I could feel the judgment hanging in the air, thick and uncomfortable. My mother stood near the fireplace, holding court. She froze when she saw me. "Sophia," she said, her voice tight, "I didn't expect you." "I know," I replied calmly. People were watching us now, pretending not to listen while listening to everything. "I just wanted to say goodbye," I continued, "to the house." She forced a smile. "Of course." I turned to the room. "Before I go, though, there's something I'd like to clarify." Her eyes widened slightly, a warning. I paid off the mortgage on this house, I said clearly. Every dollar of it, over 6 years. Gasps, murmurs, shock rippled through the room. That's not, my mother began. I have the records, I said gently, and I never asked for recognition. I asked for honesty. The room was silent now. I'm not here to argue, I continued. I'm here to reclaim my truth. I looked at my mother then, really looked at her. I loved you, but love shouldn't cost someone their future. I left without waiting for a response. Outside, the air felt lighter. My hands were still shaking, but my spine was straight. Later that night, Evan called. She's furious, he said, but people are asking questions now. Good, I replied, because the truth, once spoken, has a way of unraveling carefully built lies. The silence after that Sunday was louder than any argument we'd ever had. No calls, no messages, no guilt-laced reminders disguised as concern. My mother disappeared from my life as completely as if she'd moved to another country, and for the first time, I wasn't the one trying to bridge the gap. At first, the quiet felt peaceful. Then it started to feel suspicious. Because women like my mother don't simply let go. They retreat, regroup, and return with a new angle. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what form it would take. Work became my refuge. My apartment slowly started to feel like home. I bought real furniture, hung photos I loved. I started running again in the mornings, feeling my body grow stronger in ways I'd neglected for years. Therapy sessions shifted from grief to rebuilding, who I was without being someone's safety net. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? I said cautiously. Sophia, a woman's voice replied, calm, professional. This is Linda Carver, your mother's attorney. My heart dropped. I'm calling because your mother would like to meet with you to resolve some outstanding family matters. Family matters. I don't think there's anything left to resolve, I said. There was a brief pause. Then, she's prepared to make a generous gesture. Of course she was. What kind of gesture? I asked. Financial. The word hung in the air like bait. My chest tightened, not with hope, but with a familiar dread, because every gift from my mother had always come with strings thick enough to bind me again. I'll listen, I said finally, but that's all. We agreed to meet at the attorney's office the following week. The night before the meeting, Evan came over. He looked exhausted, older somehow. The golden child shine had dulled. She's not sleeping, he said. She keeps saying you've turned everyone against her. I didn't, I replied. I told the truth. He nodded. I know, but she doesn't see a difference. He hesitated. She told me she's planning to fix things. That word again. Fix. The attorney's office was sleek and impersonal. Glass walls, neutral colors, the faint hum of air conditioning. My mother sat at the table when I arrived, hands folded, posture perfect. She looked smaller somehow, frailer. If this were a movie, this would be the moment I'd soften. But real life has taught me better. Sophia, she said quietly, thank you for coming. I nodded and took my seat. Her attorney slid a folder toward me. Your mother is offering you a settlement, a lump sum as acknowledgement of your contributions. Acknowledgement. I opened the folder. The number stared at me. It was generous, enough to make a dent in what I'd lost, but nowhere near what I'd given. And then I saw the condition. In exchange, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement. I looked up slowly. You want me to pay me to be quiet? My mother flinched. I want peace, she said, for all of us. Peace to her meant silence. This isn't peace. It's control. She sighed. as if tired of my resistance. "Sophia, I'm trying to make things right." "No," I replied. "You're trying to make them disappear." Her eyes hardened. "You embarrassed me," she snapped suddenly, "in front of everyone." There it was. Not regret, not remorse. Image. "You lied about me," I said calmly. "I corrected the record." "You humiliated me," she repeated. "And you used me for years." Silence fell over the room. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. My mother leaned forward. "If you don't sign this," she said quietly, "things will get very uncomfortable for you." I felt my pulse spike. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning," she replied. "Families talk. Reputations matter." I closed the folder. "I won't sign," I said. Her face went cold. "Then don't expect anything. You'll get nothing." I stood up. I already got something: freedom. As I walked out, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that she'd been willing to buy my silence rather than admit the truth. But the worst part? That wasn't her final move, because 2 days later, I received an email that made my blood run cold, an email that proved my mother was willing to destroy me financially if she couldn't control me emotionally. The email arrived at 6:14 a.m. I remember the time because I'd just woken up from a dream where I was back in the old house, standing in the hallway, unable to move while the walls slowly closed in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, sharp and insistent, pulling me out of it. Unknown sender. Subject line: Notice of financial dispute. My chest tightened. I opened it. The message was brief, formal, and devastating. My mother, Margaret Whitmore, was disputing several past financial transfers, claiming they were loans she had issued to me during my adult life. She was alleging that I owed her repayment. The email stated that unless the matter was resolved amicably, further legal action would follow. I sat up so fast, the room spun. Loans. I scrolled down, my hands shaking, and saw attachments, spreadsheets, bank statements, timelines, payments she'd made over the years for groceries, utilities, small, helpful deposits she'd occasionally sent when I was younger and struggling. She was rewriting history. Every shared expense, every moment of support, every normal act of parenting, all being reframed as debt. I felt nauseous. This wasn't about money. This was retaliation. I called my lawyer immediately. "She's bluffing," he said after reviewing the documents. "Mostly, but she's hoping you'll panic and settle." "She's trying to bury me," I whispered. "Yes," he replied calmly, "and she's counting on the emotional weight to do the work for her." The emotional weight was crushing. That morning, I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. Every notification made my heart race. I imagined courtrooms, headlines, whispers, the daughter who sued her own mother, because I knew that's how she'd spin it. By noon, Evan called. "She told me you're trying to extort her," he said, his voice strained. I closed my eyes. "She's accusing me of owing her money after everything." There was a long silence. "I don't believe her," he finally said, "but she's convincing." That hurt more than I expected, because manipulation doesn't just attack you, it isolates you. By the end of the week, extended family members had started choosing sides. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations went cold. I became a topic, not a person. And in the middle of all of it, something strange happened. I stopped feeling afraid. Instead, I felt clear. Because once someone shows you they're willing to destroy you to protect themselves, the last illusion falls away. I gathered everything, every receipt, every email where she thanked me for saving the house. I worked late into the night, building a timeline of truth. And then I did something my old self would never have dared. I sent one email, not to family, not to social media, to my mother. Margaret, I will not be intimidated. Any further attempts to misrepresent our financial history will be met with full documentation and legal response. I will no longer participate in private negotiations. All communication must go through counsel. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. My hands didn't shake this time. Her reply came within minutes. "You've changed," she wrote. "I don't recognize you." I almost smiled. That was the point. The legal threat fizzled quickly once my lawyer responded. She backed off, not because she was wrong, but because she knew she couldn't win without exposing herself completely. But the damage had already been done. The relationship was over, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a quiet, irreversible way. Weeks passed, then months. The house sold, my mother moved into a smaller place. Evan kept his distance from both of us, trying to rebuild his own sense of reality after years of being shielded from truth. As for me, something unexpected happened. I began to thrive. I paid off my own debts, I traveled, I laughed more easily. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. Therapy became less about survival and more about growth. One afternoon, while unpacking a box of old documents, I found a copy of the final mortgage statement, the one marked "paid in full." For the first time, I didn't feel pain when I looked at it. I felt pride. Not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I'd learned. Love should not cost you your future. Family should not require self-erasure. And boundaries are not betrayal. They are self-respect. Closure didn't come to me the way movies promise it will. There was no tearful apology, no sudden realization, no moment where my mother showed up at my door, eyes wet, voice shaking, finally ready to tell the truth. Instead, closure arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee brewing, sunlight spilling across the counter, when I realized something strange. I hadn't thought about my mother all day. Not with anger, not with guilt, not even with sadness, just absence. And that absence felt like relief. For most of my life, my thoughts had orbited around her needs, her moods, her approval. Even after everything she'd done, part of me had still been waiting for accountability, for validation, for her to finally see me. That morning, I understood something painful and freeing at the same time. She might never see me, and I didn't need her to. Therapy helped me put words to what I'd lived through. My therapist called it parentification, a child becoming the emotional and practical caretaker for a parent. She explained how people like me grow up believing love is earned through sacrifice, how boundaries feel like cruelty, how rest feels undeserved. "That house wasn't the only thing you paid for," she said once. "You paid with your identity." That sentence stayed with me. I began rebuilding that identity slowly, deliberately. I said no more often. I stopped over-explaining. I let silence exist without rushing to fill it. When family members reached out, some apologetic, some curious, some still judgmental, I responded calmly, briefly, and honestly. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg to be understood. Those who wanted the truth listened. Those who preferred comfort chose her version. I let them. One afternoon, Evan asked to meet. He looked nervous when he arrived, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets like a kid bracing for trouble. "I didn't protect you," he said suddenly, before we'd even sat down, "and I should have." The words hit me harder than I expected. "I didn't see it," he continued, "but that doesn't excuse it." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." It didn't erase the past, but it mattered. He told me he'd moved out of our mother's place too. that living with her now felt different, smaller, sharper, more conditional. He was starting therapy himself. "I think she needs someone," he said quietly. "I know, but it can't be me anymore." He understood, or at least he didn't argue. That night, I went through my old photos, childhood birthdays, holidays, smiles that now felt staged. I didn't delete them, I didn't cling to them either. I placed them back in the box and closed the lid. That chapter of my life didn't need to be rewritten. It just needed to end. But closure, I learned, isn't just about what you leave behind. The decision didn't come from anger. It didn't come from revenge or pride or a sudden surge of confidence. It came from clarity. 6 months after I moved out, I received a letter from my mother. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter, folded neatly, sealed carefully, just like the ones she used to send when I was away at summer camp as a child. For a long time, I didn't open it. I set it on my kitchen counter and went about my day. I worked, I ran errands, I cooked dinner. Every time I passed it, I felt the old pull, the urge to rush toward her words, to search for meaning between the lines, to hope. By evening, I sat down and opened it. The letter was short. She wrote about missing me, about how things had gotten out of hand, about how she never meant for things to go this far. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the mortgage, no ownership of the lies, the threats, the manipulation. Instead, she ended with one familiar sentence: family should stick together. I folded the letter and felt nothing. No rage, no grief, no longing, just certainty. That night, I wrote back, not to argue, not to explain, not to reopen wounds. I wrote 3 sentences. I hope you find peace. I am doing well. Please don't contact me again. I didn't wait for a response. I blocked her number. I blocked her email. I asked my lawyer to handle anything legal. And for the first time in my life, I chose no contact, not as punishment, but as protection. The weeks that followed were quiet, unsettling at first, then soothing. I learned that grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like empty space where chaos used to live. I filled that space carefully. I traveled alone and learned I liked my own company. I invested in my career, not out of fear, but out of belief in myself. I made friends who didn't need saving, who didn't confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice. And slowly, the version of me that once believed love had to hurt faded. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights come alive, I thought back to that moment in the bank, the smile, the praise, the betrayal. Clearing that $540,000 mortgage didn't give me a home, but it gave me my life. It taught me that generosity without boundaries becomes self-destruction, that family doesn't get a free pass to harm you, that love should feel safe, not strategic. And if you're watching this right now, wondering whether you're wrong for wanting more and conditional affection, let me tell you this. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And walking away from manipulation is not betrayal. It's survival. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that forced you to finally choose yourself? Share your story in the comments.